this schedule really shapes up for a playoff run with a 12-team playoff.
Areas that, you need to get from experience, which is just, hey, I need to make quicker decisions.
How do you define success for this team?
National championship.
What's going on, y'all? Bud Elliott here with the Cover 3 College Ball Podcast, back again for another edition of my summer school series where we try to preview as many D1 teams as we possibly can. And today, an exciting one, a team that I feel like is just consistently a good football team now, and that's got to be awesome for my man Michael Swain with the PHOG.net to cover, man. Welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on. You're right. It's definitely a big change of pace compared to 5-6 years ago when you're wondering, can KU get 3 wins? And now it's a question of, can KU turn some one-score games into wins? And, what type of bowl game can KU get to this year? So it's definitely makes for summers very exciting talking about KU football.
Lance has done a really good job there. A rocky start to the season last year. That was, wild to see. I know there were close losses. 6 points, 3 points, 4 points. TCU was a little bit, not quite as close. And then even ASU, the eventual Big 12 champion, just a 4-point loss. And the loss to Kansas State was by 2. And a lot of their wins were like kind of emphatic over decent teams. They couldn't win any close games. I felt like for quite a while. What's the vibe entering 25 for KU?
Yeah, I think the hope is that a new look team is going to have some luck kind of swing the other way. Some of it definitely player driven, right? You go back to the Illinois game in week 2, Jalon Daniels end of the first half throws a pick 6, right? That's a play that changes the game. And you can go throughout the course of the season and really pick different plays. And that was the issue for KU last year, was just the way that they closed halves, whether it be at the first half or at the end of the game. They really struggled. And when you're in one-score games, you can't be giving away points late in halves. And now this year's team is going to be a lot different. Over 20 transfer portal additions, 2 new coordinators. It's going to have a different feel than it did last year. And I think the hope is that their offseason focus, KU's, of really trying to hone in on finishing strong, they're hoping that focus can turn into results on the field when KU's at a point where they're going to be in a lot of games. Like, you just know it. They're going to be competitive. It's going to come down to, can you make the plays in the winning moments? And that just wasn't what KU did well last year. And as a result, you miss a bowl game when a team of that talent level and that experience you expected to carry on from a 9-win season in 2023.
So Jalon Daniels is back, on the roster. Is he back healthy, expected to be full go this year? Or are there any lingering concerns about the back beyond just kind of what's normal given his career?
Yeah, so it's not the back anymore. It's a knee injury now that you're going to have to kind of keep an eye on. So at some point last year, basically he had a little bit of a knee issue. He played through it, but you looked at the offseason and they decided to do a cleanup surgery. So Jalon missed spring practice. And to maybe put some more context on why that's important, KU now is trying to bring in a whole new wide receiver room. They lost their top 4 wide receivers after last season. So 3 of them were on campus for spring practice, and they had to bring those guys up to speed with their backup and third string quarterbacks because Jalon did not go through spring practice. So that part of it is important. The fact that you can now look at this kind of career of Jalon's and say that he consistently has not been available for spring practice. And that puts such a huge emphasis, I think, on the summertime and on preseason training camp. And you can go back to the start of last season and Jalon was super rusty. Now, why was that? I think a part of that is from, KU was very careful with him in the spring of 24 with the back injury. They brought him along slowly. And then when camp came around, some of the wide receivers were banged up. And so they didn't get a lot of practice together. So, for right now, as we start summer and really get into summer, Jalon's doing everything. And Lance Leipold gave an update on that saying that, he's back, he's throwing, the arm strength is there. Now it's just about for him getting reps with a bunch of new wide receivers. And it's a bunch of guys that he's not thrown footballs to before. So this summer and preseason training camp, there's going to be a huge emphasis, I think, on getting Jalon reps to where when the season starts, it's not like the start of last season where you saw a bunch of rust and it took 5-6 weeks for it to come off, where you really saw kind of the Jalon Daniels that really took over college football in 2022 and the start of the 2023 season. So, yeah, there's definitely still some stuff to monitor, but the back seems to be fine. Now it's just a matter of kind of getting back to 100% physically after a little knee cleanup. Nothing too big, though.
So coordinator change for KU this offseason. Jim Zabrowski takes over. I know he's worked with Lance before. How are we expecting this offense to change under him?
So I think it's going to be a reversion back to what you saw from KU in 2022 and 2023 under any coordinator.
Thank God. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, hey, you're preaching to the choir. I'm sure any
Yeah.
Kansas fan that's watching that had that same exact reaction. And this is nothing against Jeff Grimes, but it just didn't work. It wasn't a fit. I think he tried to add some things into the offense that didn't fit, and it created a bad situation where he tried to add some screens and jet motions, and guess what? By week 4, those were no longer a part of the offense. So you're going to see some movement back, I think, to a lot of the pre-snap motion, a lot more of the passing concepts over the middle of the field that made KU such a difficult offense to stop, the way that they attacked defenses and made safeties have to think and read and react. So that's going to be a huge part of it. And if you ever listen to Jim Zabrowski talk, it's much more of a player-driven focus. Jeff Grimes had no issues, I think, calling out players in press conferences. And I think sometimes that can cause a little bit of players looking over the shoulder like, what the heck? Like, what's going on here? Like, whoa, why are we getting thrown under the bus? So Zabrowski has a long-standing relationship. He's been the quarterback's coach at KU since Leipold took over. He knows the players. The players all love him. And so I think it's just got a different vibe to it right now than it did last year. But I think broadly, it's still going to be a lot of the same offense you saw from KU in 2022, 2023. I just think Zabrowski, he was always known as a guy that was really important in the passing concepts. I think you're going to see a lot more of the stuff that KU had success with a couple years ago, really compared to some of the stuff outside the sticks and outside the numbers that KU did last year that didn't really work.
So, I mean, they're going to have to be a little bit better at passing because Devin Neal was an absolute stud. I mean, just ask Colorado in that ball game where he went totally nuts. 1,262 yards, also 26 catches. Who replaces them? Is it going to be more committee? Do we think you're going to have a true number one back like they had last year with Neal?
Yeah, so I think it's going to be a lot more of maybe a 1A, 1B situation. Daniel Highshaw is back, and that's a big addition for KU because at one point, it looked like maybe he wasn't going to come back to KU and maybe he was going to look for something else. KU was able to get him to return, and that's a big thing because obviously he provides continuity, but he's someone that has a great story. Really dislocated his hip in I believe 2020, dislocated the same hip again in 2022, and has struggled to stay healthy, I think, since. But last year, I think, showed some flashes, but then has come into this offseason and really has changed his body, dropped a lot of weight. He looks about as lean as I had seen him since he's been at KU. And I think people around the program are really excited about what he showed during spring practice. Look, he's not going to be Devin Neal, right? We're talking about the best running back to come through KU ever statistically. But he is someone that with his physicality and just with his overall skill set, I think can be a productive player. And then KU also got LeSean Williams from Iowa, who was Iowa's leading rusher a couple of years ago before Caleb Johnson took over. But he's also a guy that's got experience, a super productive player. So I think you can look at the top end of the running back room and say, KU's got some talent there that can compete and can play at a Big 12 level and produce. Maybe some depth questions, are younger guys like Johnny Thompson and Harry Stewart ready to step up as running back 3. But look, you got 2 really good running backs at the top, and that's a good spot to be in.
Receiver is similarly really cleared out. Luke Grimm, Quentin Skinner, Lawrence Arnold, Trevor Wilson are gone. Top 3 tight ends, Casey Cardell, and I didn't write the other guy's name down. But that's a lot to lose, even if I know their passing offense wasn't amazing last year, but it does feel like that's a lot gone. Mm-hmm. Who do we expect to step up for KU? They did take quite a few guys in the portal.
Totally, they really did. And here's the thing, KU's wide receivers last year, it's an interesting situation because it's the same group for 3 straight years. Like that doesn't happen very often. We've got the same receiving core for 3 straight years, and so this year is going to look different. It's just going to look different because they're new players, but there's also different skill sets. And I think KU really lacked some dynamic athleticism at wide receiver. Quentin Skinner was really fast in a straight line. Receiving wasn't maybe his skill set all the time. Luke Grimm was really consistent. So KU went out and really the guy to keep an eye on this fall is Emmanuel Henderson from Alabama. A guy that, man, you look at the Georgia game, the catch he made in that contest. I mean, it is an elite catch. He didn't get a ton of targets, but he's someone that was able to see the field at Alabama early. And if you talk to people around the KU program, they love his speed. They think he might be the fastest wide receiver they've had since Leipold took over. So he's a guy that right now I'm tabbing as like one to watch. If KU's offense is going to go boom this fall, I think Henderson's going to have a big role to play. But then they've also got some maybe more underrated transfer additions. You know, someone like Levi Wentz from Albany is going to fly under some radars if you're scanning the 24/7 Sports commit page. But he's someone that during spring practice really turned some heads. You know, good size, good length, good athleticism overall. Not necessarily a pop athleticism, but a guy that can really move well. And then out of the slot, Cam Pickett coming from Ball State. He's probably going to be KU starting slot wide receiver. So I think right now those three are the ones that are known commodities. A newcomer this summer is Bryson Canty, who came in from Columbia. I think behind Henderson, I think he's the guy I'm maybe the highest on. 3 years of legit production at Columbia. I think that is something that I value in the transfer portal is, have you done it for multiple years? And he did. And so you look at that kind of core four, and that feels like that's going to be the group that KU is going to lean on at wide receiver. Now at tight end, it's a different situation. Deshaun Hanukkah tore his Achilles last spring practice. So in the spring of 2024, he missed the season. He's now back. I think KU feels pretty good about him at the top. Kean Burnett was a really big transfer addition for KU last winter. He went through spring practice. He was a transfer from Arizona. I don't know what we're calling it these days, like a Marfo when you transfer and then transfer back. Well, he transferred back to Arizona. And so now he's going to be with the Wildcats for senior year. And so KU then had to go out and get Bowden Grown from Rice as a transfer in the summer. So really it looks like Hanukkah, Leighton Cure, and Groen are going to be the guys that KU is going to rely on at tight end. So it's a whole different new look room. I do think at wide receiver specifically, there's a little bit more just kind of raw playmaking ability that KU has that maybe wasn't as prevalent with past wide receiver rooms.
Offensive line wise, they do lose two guys to graduation, another guy off to the NFL. We feeling okay here. Bryce Foster's back. I know they felt pretty good about him at center, at least.
Yeah, they love Bryce. I mean, man, he's someone that if you go back and look through the transfer portal additions for KU, 5-6 years from now, we'll be looking back and saying what an addition it was to get someone like that. He's going to be, if he plays the same level he did last year or improves, he'll be a two-time All Big 12 center. And so left tackle is going to be Calvin Clements. Last year, that was Bryce Cabledew. He got drafted by the Seahawks. Clements will be in his first year of starting, but he's someone that they love. They love the talent. He really rotated in last year. So he has game experience, but it's going to be his first year starting. But they do like the talent there with Calvin. At right guard, most likely it's going to be Kobe Baines. He may do left guard. They're going to tinker in the fall to see kind of how it all shakes out. But between Bryce Foster, Kobe Baines, who's in his third year starting, and Calvin Clements, you feel good about three. And now it's a question of, okay, can someone like, Tavake Tuikolovatu from UCLA, can he step in as your left guard? He's someone that if you watch a practice for KU, man, he pops like 6'4", 6'5", like 330. He's a huge human being. Can he win that left guard spot? And can he really take it over? And then you go and get Enrique Cruz from Syracuse, a transfer that kind of fits the athletic profile KU wants at tackle, right? They want guys that can move. And that's what Enrique Cruz does. And so really going into camp, it's a question of, all right, left guard, right tackle. Can those guys, those transfers you brought in, can they go in and really grab that spot? Because if they can, you feel pretty good about it. And then all of a sudden the depth can kind of look pretty healthy because they've gotten some guys from G5 schools in the portal that played as true freshmen who you'd like to theoretically redshirt this fall, but they may have to be thrust into action if someone, like Enrique Cruz or Tuikolovatu doesn't step up. So definitely some dynamics to watch there, but I think we're at the point now with KU's offensive line and the coaches where, man, every year they seem to put it together. Like you can have questions about it. I had questions about it last year. They flipped their tackles during preseason camp. It worked out pretty well. So I think they've earned a certain degree of, trust of saying that, yeah, they're going to be able to figure out a way to get five guys to play really well together.
Awesome. All right. So is there a guy we have not discussed yet who, if he finally hits his ceiling, maybe it's a guy we've written off, or maybe he's a young guy that we're not really expecting to make a huge impact this year, but if he does hit his ceiling now, it really changes our outlook of this team?
I mean, honestly, it's Jalon Daniels. Like he's not put together a full season of good football. Can he do it? I really do think this team goes as far as Jalon Daniels. We can talk about the wide receivers. We can talk about the offensive line, the running backs, tight ends. It comes down to Jalon Daniels. Can he put together a consistent season? If he can, I feel pretty confident about KU getting deep into bowl territory, maybe even competing at the top of the Big 12. Like, it's just going to be a question of, hey, can Jalon Daniels, for the first time in his career, put together 12 plus games of consistent football? If he does, I feel good about the offense and where it's going to be. But again, it's just something he's not done in he's been around since 2020.
That's fair. All right. So on the flip side, we're going to hit a little bit of this Kansas defense.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ, streaming free anywhere you are.
All right, guys, welcome back into the Cover 3 College Ball Podcast. I'm talking to Michael Swain of PHOG.net, talking all things Kansas. Let's turn the page now to the defense. A new defensive coordinator as well as DK McDonald comes in. What should we expect different from this defense this year, either because of McDonald's hire or because of personnel changes?
Yeah. Oh, wow. We can go a lot of ways with this. So I think, DK McDonald, the big talking point during spring was really simplifying the defense. Brian Borland had been around for a while, and at least kind of the talk in hindsight was that, maybe sometimes some of the calls got a little complicated and guys maybe found themselves thinking instead of playing. And so during spring, right, one of the talking points is, hey, we're going to make things more simple. I also think there's going to be some degree of some added wrinkles. DK McDonald has experience in the 3-3-5, right? He was safeties coach at Iowa State. One of the guys that was a part of that key room when they redid the defense and created the 3-3-5 that you now see across college football. So, is KU going to move to a 3 down front? No, they're not. They continue to recruit to a 4 down front. But I think, you look at what they did with the linebackers at Iowa State and with the 5 defensive back look, I think some of that stuff is going to be tweaked a little bit. And KU did a little bit of that last year, playing Marvin Grant, who was a safety, as kind of this like rover Cinco role is what they called it. So I think you'll see a lot more of that, kind of the 5D back look, the 4-2-5. It will definitely be kind of KU's base look this year. But I think between potentially simplifying things and then adding some of that in there, it's a defense that should look different. Now, the personnel is going to look different too. For really the first time, KU's linebackers room underwent a pretty big transition. Athleticism was definitely a big weakness for KU at the linebacker spot. And that's nothing against guys like J.B. Brown or, Cornell Wheeler, who I think had good moments. But top to bottom right now, you can look at the linebacker room. You've got Bengali Kamara, coming from South Carolina, played in the SEC. Man, he certainly looks the part. And I think across the defense, I think there are definitely some guys that you just walk by practice and you're like, yeah, he looks good. He looks like he can go play. And that maybe always hasn't been the case, especially at that linebacker position. So I think for KU, it's really just going to come down to, can so many of these newcomers come together and create a cohesive defensive unit? And look, I have some confidence that that's going to happen. But again, I'm still kind of in a little bit of a believe it when I see it mode.
I assume that the secondary is probably the second greatest area of concern. Obviously, linebacker, they lost so much. In the front, I mean, they return a bunch.
Mm-hmm.
Like that could be, I don't know if it's a strength, but like certainly you get Miller back, who had 9 sacks. Like, they don't lose that much up front. Given who they play as far as passing attacks, how much of a concern is the secondary?
Yeah, so the secondary has undergone a big transition. You had Kobe Bryant, Melo Dotson, right? 2 guys who ended up being All-Americans last year. They're gone. And so KU now is asking Jalen Todd, who was going to be a sophomore this fall, to step up. He really, I think, was a contributor, a guy that they didn't really see when he stepped on foot on campus. He was light, and he put up 20 pounds, got big, really contributed last year on special teams and playing as a slot corner. Well, he's going to step up. He's got to start now. KU also went to the portal and got DJ Graham from Utah State. Some people might remember him. He's the defensive back from Oklahoma that had the crazy catch against Nebraska. Well, that's him. He's in his final year. He's back. He had some decent numbers at Utah State last year and was decent at Oklahoma too. So those 2 guys look like they're going to start. KU added Saeed Gibbs from Georgia Tech. He might be KU starting nickelback, but he'll definitely provide some depth at corner as well. you look at the starting safeties, Lyric Ross coming from Oklahoma State, Taylor Davis, a guy that was a breakout player last fall. They're going to start. I do have some concerns about the depth at safety. You got to see some guys that haven't necessarily stepped up yet step up. And so I like kind of the top 4 KU has, right? The starters at corner, I think, are going to be solid. I think, you look at what you got at safety in your starters. I feel good about that. But once you get into kind of these depth questions, that for me is when I get a little bit concerned, because there's just not a lot of proven depth. I think KU's got kind of a 4 or 5 guys for those 5 spots. But then if 2 guys go down with injury, then you're really kind of asking some serious questions about the secondary.
Makes sense. All right. So looking at this schedule is interesting. I mean, Fresno at home, that's a bit of a rebuild job, obviously.
Yeah.
Wagner at Missouri, which we don't really know what they'll be. Not easy, but like that's not one of your probably not a top quartile SEC team. I think we can say conservatively there. West Virginia, Cincinnati, at UCF, at Texas Tech, bye after Texas Tech, host Kansas State, host Oklahoma State, at Arizona, at Iowa State, host Utah. How do you find success for this Kansas team this year?
Man, it's so funny because across the Big 12, there's so many programs that have had so many new transfers where you're talking 25, 30, 40 transfers.
Yes.
It's so hard to project. Like, I have no idea how Oklahoma State's going to look. They've got a new staff and a new team, and so you can go up and down this schedule. And if you want to be super optimistic, man, you can put some W's on there. But if you want to be pessimistic and say other teams hit on their transfers and say things go wrong for KU, then you ask questions. But I think you look at KU's schedule, and the big thing for me is them playing in week 0, because then they get the extra bye week throughout the course of the season. So they get a bye week after Missouri, going into West Virginia. They get a bye week going into K-State. KU has been really, really good off of bye weeks under Lance Leipold. And so I think getting that extra bye week is really important for KU. Now, as for, I think the win total is 7.5 right now for KU. Man, Vegas is good at this, because I kind of have KU in kind of that 7-8, win range. If things go really well, I could see KU putting something together where they are competing at the top of the conference, right? Going back to my previous point, if all of a sudden we're talking at the end of the year, Jalon Daniels is one of the top 4 quarterbacks in the Big 12, top 3 quarterbacks in the conference, KU's going to be up there with wins because they're going to have the talent. And I think the athleticism on defense should allow them to be a much better unit, and not a unit that is kind of the bend but don't break type of defense. So I think you can look at the schedule and you can kind of go wherever you want with it. KU's going to be a lot of 1-score games, and it's just going to come down to how KU plays in them in those crunch moments. Can they come up with the big plays unlike last year? If they can, they're going to have a lot of success. If they can't, I think that's another year where you're looking at kind of, can they scrap to get to a bowl game? But again, perspective here. 5 years ago, KU didn't win a game. So, you got to kind of keep some of the growth in perspective, but this is a big season for KU. It's a huge season for momentum for KU. They need to have the foot on the gas and really put together a strong campaign where you can get some of that donor support going, and you can really continue some of the program momentum, getting back to a bowl game, getting back to being consistent in terms of having really good coaching and good decision-making. And if KU is able to do that, it's going to continue the program's trend. But it really is a pivotal year for KU to really figure it out, because they had a big turnover over the offseason. It's a roster that they went in the portal and rebuilt. And now it's just a question of, can you put together the pieces to have a successful team? Michael, really enjoyed this. Everyone needs to check out PHOG.net. Of course, you always kill it. So appreciate it, man. We'll see you soon. Awesome. Thanks, bud.